so excited to be doing our final panel of GalaxyCon Austin. I'm bringing out my partners in crime from Inglorious Treksperts, Darren Doctorman and Ashley Miller. But more importantly, we have the man who's been looking all weekend for the nuclear vessels, Walter Koenig. So, did you find the nuclear vessels?
No.
Okay.
Not in Alameda.
That was a clip from Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Back in the days when you were an actor going from show to show, you were doing shows like The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and just
I Spy.
I Spy, of course. What was it like for you being, sort of a working actor in the '60s without a steady gig yet?
Well, the early '60s were fun. I mean, I started working. I had no heavy responsibilities. I wasn't married. I didn't have a family. I didn't work very frequently, but it was every time was a sense of accomplishment, in a sense that I'm that one step further into the business. I'm not yet a veteran, but of the business, but I'm getting jobs occasionally, and good jobs actually. I mean, that was the guest lead opposite James Caan. James Caan and I went to the same drama school together. We were there at the same time.
But you didn't get kicked out.
No, he got kicked out. He got kicked out only because he didn't get along with one of the speech teachers. And she evidently declared that she would not return if he did. So at that juncture, she was more important than Jimmy was.
So at that point, bada beep, bada bop, bada boop, he's out.
Yeah. I didn't even realize it until we came back in the second year, and he wasn't there. But he was a presence. He was a very strong presence at school. Our class. Now, of course, I don't know how many of people here, you were probably all under 50. So when I mention these names, I don't even know if you'll know them. But in my class of 70 or 75 students was James Caan, Dabney Coleman, Chris Lloyd, Jessica Walter, and a couple of other actresses named Elizabeth Ashley and Brenda Vaccaro, who all did leads in movies.
Yeah.
They all did leads in movies, so it was an amazing class, out of 70. And it was great. I don't know, I once in a while I reminisce about the old days, particularly the older you get, the older I get, the more I think about the past, and I sort of gravitate towards the best times,
Sure.
Think about those. And that first year in the neighborhood playhouse was one of the best years of my life. Classes all day, the kind of classes that I loved, some that I was terrible in. We had a voice class. I was the only one that wasn't ever asked to sing. It was just one of those things. But I just loved those classes, and there wasn't really any competition. We were just trying to get better as actors. We weren't worrying about showcasing. We weren't worrying about where a job was coming from. We were there for the purpose of learning, of just becoming better at our craft. I did work in a hospital. I had no money. I had absolutely no money. So I worked as an orderly in a hospital in New York while I was going to school. I would go to school from I don't know, 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock. I go home and I try to sleep for a few hours, and then I'd work from midnight to 8 in the morning.
Which hospital was it?
Mount Sinai.
Because my mom was a nurse in training there.
Oh, yeah?
So at the same time.
At the same
Yeah,
time?
yeah.
That's
Who knows? Maybe you two dated.
Well,
Yeah, it could be.
she did say she knew a lot of nice Jewish boys.
Well, I was already through college. I had already graduated college.
Sure.
Went back to the neighborhood playhouse. Yeah, so that was a great year. It was a great year. Got to just do plays, and even though even though I couldn't sing, I loved the voice classes and just had a terrific time.
Thank God Star Trek never did a musical episode. Between you not being able to sing and Leonard thinking he could sing, it would have been a terrible episode.
Leonard?
Yeah.
Well, what about Bill?
What about him?
I mean, I had that tape of him doing all those Elton John songs.
Oh, sure.
And I played it for my daughter and her friends, and they thought it was supposed to be funny.
Bill says that they were supposed to be funny now. Mars ain't the kind of place to raise a kid. What kind of classes were there for you to take at the time? You said voice for singing and et cetera, and
Yeah.
projecting.
We also, believe it or not, we also had a class on the history of theater.
Sure.
And that was great fun because I could take notes or not. we didn't have any tests at the end of the year. When I realized we were never going to be tested, I just relaxed and just closed my eyes and listened to what was going on. It was great.
It must have been disappointing because you obviously have such warm feelings to that period of time and nostalgia that when you were reunited with Christopher Lloyd, he was such a method actor that he didn't want to talk about any of that.
He was a method actor?
Well, Christopher Lloyd, when he...
No, he wasn't.
What kind of Trekspert are you?
Chris and I were best friends. We hung out together. In fact, he you know, the character he played, Reverend Jim, or
Sure.
that had to be an extrapolation of his family history, because he came from enormous wealth. They owned Texaco. They owned the whole Texaco oil. And I spent the weekend up at his country home, you know, with the elevator, the house with the elevator in it, and the two-story pipe organ. And so he was, you know, and he dressed like he did, you know, on Taxi. I mean,
Like a slob.
yeah, total flop. Before the holes in your jeans were fashionable.
Right.
You know? But he had an MG, you know, one of those little sports cars.
Yeah.
He left it on the street every day. Every day he got a ticket. Every day he got a ticket. Didn't matter. Didn't care about it. You know, just a terrifically regular guy. Just a regular guy.
He must be paying a lot in alimony then, because his autograph is going for a lot of money these days. You know, I don't know where all that family money went.
I don't know.
Was it exciting for you when you found out that he was going to be doing Search for Spock? I mean, to have the chance.
No, I was pissed off. No, I really was. What happened was, we had this great relationship, you know, hung out together. He thought I was very funny, which interesting, since he's made his career out of being very funny. Oh, so we were doing Star Trek: The Motion Picture when he was doing
Taxi.
Taxi,
Yeah.
right. So I wandered over to his end of the lot, and I knocked on his dressing room door, and he comes out, and so help me God, this is a guy who was my best friend for 2 years. He comes out and goes, yes. And I said, how you doing, Chris?
Method.
He wouldn't acknowledge me. He kept this freaking thing going about being Taxi, being Reverend Jim. And I finally said, well, screw it. I walked away. And I didn't see him again.
Microphone.
I didn't see him again until he was playing.
Crouch.
Yeah, what was his
The
name?
Klingon. Crouch.
Yeah, whatever. And he looked at me like,
I never forget a face.
and there was a real sense of self-consciousness, which almost made me forgive him, because he obviously remembered that he was a jerk, So, yeah, and then we got over it, and we were fine.
Yeah. Because you went into Star Trek 3 with not the greatest feelings, because you had such a great role.
Oh, my God, I had terrible feelings. Yeah. Thank you, Mark, because I don't generally tell this particular story. I had such a nice role in Star Trek 2. I really appreciated that they had given me something to do. And working with Ricardo Montalban was wonderful. He was a terrific guy, just such a gentleman. And he was so continental and kissed all the ladies' hands. And he was just a delightful guy. So when Star Trek 3 was being talked about, I figured you can't go anywhere but up. You did a good job in 2. Me, I'm talking about myself. And it can only mean that it could be better in 3. And I started hearing rumors about the script. People who had read it, and it said that your part is not as good as it was in 2. So I came to the studio to read the script with my agent. My agent drove us in his car. And I met with Harv Bennett, and he was very friendly, but I was uncomfortable because I knew I wasn't going to like the script. So he gave us each a copy of the script to read because I hadn't signed yet. There's some pretend thing going on, like I wouldn't sign unless I really loved the script. Well, that wasn't the case, I would have signed. But I wasn't prepared to be very disappointed, and I was really disappointed with Star Trek 3. And Harv Bennett had asked us to hang around after we read it, and he'd come down and he'd talk to us. Well, I was willing to do that. We came in my agent's car. He had another appointment. He said he couldn't wait. So I jumped in his car and we left. Bennett was furious. He was absolutely furious. He knew that I must not have liked the script. And that I hadn't stayed was an incredible slight to him. And he was very, very upset with me. So I got a call from my agent saying, and this was very early in the negotiations, and it's almost a matter of form that the first offer is not going to be their final offer. Then you negotiate from there. You get something more than the first offer. So the casting folks had called my agent and told them that the first offer was a take it or leave it. And although that's not really a contractual term, it's pretty much means you take it or you leave it. It's really a final resort. It's when you come to the end of negotiations. And I knew it was less than they were going to be offering George and Nichelle, and I couldn't, in good conscience, take it. I simply couldn't take it. I called my family together, my wife and 2 kids. I said, I'm not going to be in Star Trek 3. And, it wasn't such a big deal to them, but it was a big deal to me. I felt really bad. I went to bed feeling, because I said, I leave it. I just said, I leave it. Can't do it. Next day, I get another offer, So there's a lesson to be learned there, part of which is that we really were more important to the show than we were given credit, back in the day. We knew that there were 3 stars and that they were going to be treated with the greatest respect. We were never treated badly. It was not a thing like, we had a lot to complain about. It was an era, particularly when we were doing this series, when you really had a caste system, C-A-S-T-E. Even if you had 6 or 7 running characters, they were the principal ones, the primary ones, who got the billing in the front of each episode. And then there were the supporting actors who were there and had, were there every week, but had far less importance in terms of their contribution. And their billing was at the end of the show, and not only at the end of the episode, but interspersed with the guest stars. So we didn't even have that kind of respect. So I don't know what the hell I was saying.
Their revenge was to put you in the pink Pushkin outfit in that.
Was later.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, that was 3.
Oh, that.
Yes.
In 3, yeah. Yeah, well, but they don't.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was very interesting because they put me in this pink outfit. It was not fashionable to be dressed in pink if you were a guy. Not
The
then.
big white collar.
Yeah. It was the white collar. The pink
Yes.
was okay.
Okay.
It's like Jack Horner.
So, who was I to complain? That's the way I felt. And this was the second movie.
Third movie.
Third movie,
Yeah,
right.
the first time they see you
Leonard
on the
was
bridge.
Directing. And Leonard came up to me after the second or third day of shooting, maybe even the first day, and they said, we looked at the dailies, and that I don't like that pink costume you're wearing. We're going to change it. And I said, oh, thank God. And he says, well, why the hell didn't you say something? Why didn't I say something? Because I never thought they would listen to me. That's why I didn't say anything. I thought, I remembered how we were treated. We weren't treated badly. I don't want to leave that impression. It's just that we were sort of indifferent to the whole thing. Bill never said hello. It was we were there and we did our job and we participated and we during the series and we laughed when everybody laughed, but there wasn't a sense of our being integral to what was going on. And we carried that over when we started doing the movies. And even though by then we had been exposed to fandom,
Right.
and learned that they loved us all, regardless of how much we contributed. It was just, you're part of Star Trek, you're family, and you should be treated as family. So it was then that, we started to feel our oats a little bit. We began to realize, that they do consider us to be important, to be significant. And it would make a difference if we weren't there. And the attitude that was basically Bill's was evidently not the country's. Bill really thought of us as being subordinate and hardly acknowledged us. It wasn't mean. He never did anything mean. Well, not to me, not anything mean. But he just didn't consider us to be important to the job. It was the fans that kept, bringing more and more reinforcement to our being involved.
Well, the expectation that you would be more involved was understandable because on 2, Harv had involved you so early to look at the script and give your thoughts on the script, and in addition to the fact that you had a much larger role. But he really leaned on you for advice, which he took.
Yes. Yeah, that was interesting. I got the script before 3 and was disappointed. I got the script before 2 and was aghast. I couldn't believe it. There was such a violation of structure, of literary structure there, that I couldn't believe that no one else had told Bennett, you can't do this. You can't kill one of the principals, one of the 2 most important actors in the second act. You know, that happens. That's the curtain scene. That's the end of the movie. If you're going to kill somebody who's a hero like that, you make it the climax of your story. So I called him without having spoken to him before that, and said, "I'm sure you've been told this, but you've got a serious problem of structure with killing Spock. You can't do it." He says, because he thought I was calling to talk about acting. I said, I'm not calling you as an actor. So he asked me to come in. And I came in and I sat with him and the other producer, who was a great guy.
Bob Sallin.
Yeah, great guy. Lovely human being. And I said, I know you've heard, and they hadn't. Nobody had told. I mean, if you've taken one literature course or one course in composition, you know that. You know you can't do that. So he was sufficiently impressed by my passion, you know. I mean, I had to be right because I was so freaking passionate about it. So he asked me to do a Trekkie run on the script, to go over the whole script and find out the inconsistencies, things that were different than they would have been in the TV series. And they were small things. But I found a bunch, and I submitted those. I showed them we wouldn't say this. We would use the abbreviation, or we would use the entire word. Things like that. And they changed all those things.
Well, there was one mistake that you didn't call to their attention, which was...
No, I did not call it to their attention.
And what was that, Walter?
Well, see, I read the script, and I was, very honest and very straightforward, and to the best of my ability as a person with some experience with writing, I told him everything except the fact that Chekhov wasn't in the episode that Khan did on the television series. I just felt that, what if I told them and they said, you're right, my God, we've got to give this part to somebody else. I couldn't risk it, guys. I couldn't risk that happening. So instead, I made up an explanation for where was Chekhov during Space Seed, and Chekhov, and I went to conventions, people sitting in the audience, and I said, Chekhov was so sick with a condition called Malapropsky's malady that he was ensconced in the bathroom and had been there for hours and hours. Well, poor Mr. Khan's genetically engineered kidneys were about to explode. And he was pounding on the door, begging to be let in, until finally the door opened. Chekhov stepped out. Khan grabbed him and said, your face, I will never forget. So everybody forgave me for that. The little postscript that goes with that story, and it happened in the last 2 or 3 years. I was somewhere, and some young person came up to me, young 20, 21-year-old guy, and he said, I heard this story about Chekhov being in the bathroom, and that's why we didn't see him on Spacey. I said, yeah, well, that was a joke. That was something I made up. And he stopped and he looked at me and stared me in the eyes and said, well, I'm going to consider it canon.
I got to ask you, because, it's no secret that George for years was lobbying to be captain. You are now the president of the Federation, thanks to Terry Metalis. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit, now the cat's out of the bag, about how you ended up, or your descendant ended up becoming the president of the Federation in Star Trek Picard Season 3.
Well, I think the best way to find that out is to ask Terry, since he's here. Well, except convention's almost over. It was his idea. It was totally his idea. I lived one block this way, one block that way from Todd, Captain.
Stashwick.
Stashwick, yeah. We lived 2 blocks away. I walked my dog there all the time.
You play Dungeons and Dragons with him.
What?
I think you play Dungeons and Dragons with him. No.
No. But we got to talking one day, and he mentioned to me that Terry, who I didn't know at all, was thinking about using Chekhov in the 3rd season of
Picard.
Picard. And I said, great. And then, you walk 10 feet away and you dismiss it. It's pie in the sky. It's not the kind of thing that's going to happen. So I didn't put a lot of credibility in it. I thought it was fun to think about, but it wasn't. But then they called me, and they initially, this is interesting, initially they were going to actually put it on film. They were going to actually have me being taped, shot. And I thought that would have been great, except, when I think about it in retrospect, I think part of the fact that just hearing the voice is part of the discovery of that I was in there. And I think that gives it, kind of underscores the surprise.
Right.
Because you got to say, wait a second, that voice sounds familiar. Holy cow, that's him. And you get to make that discovery. And I think that was a fun thing. It was a good thing. But yeah, he's evidently done that with other characters. He's brought them back. And that's a neat thing to do, I think.
And the funny thing is, he named that character, your descendant, Anton Chekhov.
Yeah, that's not funny. That's very touching.
It is.
It's very touching. Because he named it after the
playwright,
actor,
and Anton Yelchin. Yeah.
Who I met, by the way, and who was a really charming, very bright young man, and it was great fun. I was invited to the premiere of their first movie, and I went with some apprehension because I am not a totally giving, generous person. I was concerned about my reaction to the movie, how I was going to deal with the fact it was a whole new cast. In effect, to interpret it in one way, usurping us and in our position with the public, and whether how much I could tolerate this whole thing happening, and losing our identity, whatever the hell it was bothering me. So I went in there fearful, really, that I was going to be a real jerk about it, and not be able to enjoy it. As it turned out, I'm a great guy. I loved it. I loved the movie. I thought it was great fun. And I thought Anton was great. I was worried about how I'd feel about that. Didn't bother me. No, I didn't feel threatened at all. I had actually grown up. somewhere in between, I had grown up to some degree. So, okay, so the whole point is to bring to this one moment. The movie is over. We're having a big party in a parking lot, a few blocks away. And all the actors from the show, they all are surrounded by journalists and reporters, and Anton has his group. They're totally surrounding him. And I just walked by. I didn't want to bother him. And he sees me and goes, Walter, I've got my own Chekhov doll.
That's great. I want to ask you, before we ask for questions, in addition to acting, you've also, had a career where you've written as well, and it's a different muscle, but you've done some really fun stuff. Obviously, you've done books. You did an episode of the animated series, The Infinite Vulcan, which, and then, as you know, we absolutely love your memoir of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which is a really great look inside the making of a very troubled movie. Very honest, because it was written contemporaneously with the making of the movie. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of exercising that muscle and what it does for you in addition to acting and sort of the stuff that you really have enjoyed doing over the years in terms of writing?
Well,
Microphone.
I feel pretty pleased with the stuff that's been
Microphone.
I feel pretty pleased with the stuff that's been published. Chekhov's Enterprise was great fun. That was easy. I mean, I'd go from the soundstage to my dressing room, and I'd sit down and I'd write. And I wrote every day on what we did every day. So that was a lot of fun. I had never written. I did. I wrote a satiric fantasy called Buck Alice and the Actor Robot, which was a novel. It was a kind of zany novel that I think had support in some quarters and probably not in others. I had never written formally. I'd never put anything down on paper that was more than a page or two. But that happened. I wrote that novel because we had just been canceled. The series had been canceled, 1969, 70. And I woke up in the morning and what the hell am I going to do with my life? The phone wasn't ringing. I wasn't in demand. And I had a baby at home. And I didn't know how to go about my life. And I was really depressed. I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. I saw no objective. And then one day I said, Walter, sound a little bit like George here. Walter, you've got to get up. You've got to go forward with your life. So I said, well, I'll write. I don't need anybody, else to help me with that. I can just sit down and write. So I took paper and pen to the library every day, and I wrote for several hours, and thoroughly enjoyed it, and finished this bizarre novel. The interesting thing was I showed it to 3 writers. I showed it to George Clayton Johnson. There was another writer who wrote under a pseudonym. Shimon Winselberg was his name. He wrote under a pseudonym for Star Trek. George Clayton Johnson wrote for Star Trek. They both thought it could be published. They both thought it had enough merit to be published. Then I showed it to Harlan Ellison, who was the hottest writer of the time. He wrote stories in store windows and collected a crowd around him, and he hated my book. He just thought it was terrible. So his vehemence propelled me to take it and stick it in a drawer, and I stuck it in a drawer for 18 years. Yeah, I didn't look at it again for 18 years. Then somebody said, I remember this book you wrote, and could I look at it again? And I showed it to them, and they showed it to somebody else, and they showed it to a third person, and the third person had a small publishing company, and they published it. And then a second small company read it, and when the contract expired with the first one, the second one published it. And to help me, a third company read it and published it. So it's been published by 3 different companies, probably as many publishers as most people have, with the fewest copies actually sold. Yeah. So anyway, so when I wrote Chekhov's Enterprise, that was just something that I could, and we had so much time to kill on that first movie because we didn't work for it. We came to work and we didn't hurry. We just was hurry up and wait, for hours and hours and hours. And then when we did work, I was able to just go back into my room and write down what we had written. So yeah, that was great fun.
It's good to know Harlan was so encouraging, true to form.
A real nurturer.
That was a really mercurial relationship. Very, very tough. I hung up on him. I called them names. I used the F word.
Fabulous.
Fire truck?
Many times. Many times.
Okay, let's do some questions from the audience. I don't see, there's no mic out up there apparently, but if you can just put up your
Stand
hand.
up, talk loudly, and we'll repeat your question.
Yeah, absolutely. There in the back.
I think they might be bringing a
Okay,
microphone
fantastic.
out.
Well, while we're waiting, go ahead, please.
Hold on.
I don't think there's...
It's Let's Make a Deal.
Oh, no, they're
Uh-oh.
upstairs.
Oh, shit.
My God, now he's Bob Barker.
He walks among them.
Thank you. Hi, I just want to say Chekhov was my favorite character in the original series. So my question is, do you have any nice stories about working with Nichelle Nichols?
Well, did I have any nice stories about working with Nichelle? Oh yeah, we got along very well. She was, fun. She was always fun. I started telling this story, and I haven't. I never did in the past, but we were doing a convention in the early '70s. I think it was in Los Angeles, and we were still doing them there. And we were backstage and about to go on, and some guy comes up to us with a magazine, and it's an old beat-up magazine with a picture of Nichelle without any clothes. And he says, "Is this you?" Total moron. And I said, "What the hell are you doing with that?" I said, "Put it away. Don't take it out again." And he did. And Nichelle hadn't said anything. But about 10 minutes after that, or after we stepped off stage, she was at my shoulder, and I heard her say, "Thank you, Walter." And we never mentioned it again. We never brought it up again. But I think it was a bonding moment. It's like she knew that I had her back and that I would be there under those kind of circumstances. And it became part of the deal,
Thank you.
Other questions? Do we have a mic now? Oh, no, we have Walter in the audience. We don't need a mic.
Yeah.
Yeah, quickly, come on up.
So, we haven't talked at all
We need the microphone so it can all hear you.
We haven't talked at all about post Star Trek, and I am a fan of Babylon 5 as well. You talked about the cast kind of structure in filming the original series. How does that contrast with your experience filming the recurring roles on Babylon 5?
We haven't exchanged any money, right?
Not yet.
For me, that's a great question, because I have only good things to say about having worked on Babylon 5. Not that I don't have good things to say about Star Trek, but there's a bump in the road here and there on Star Trek. But no, everybody I worked with on Babylon 5 was great. They were just so. Of course, I had Star Trek behind me, and that was part of what that legacy I brought to Babylon 5 and my appearances there. And I guess they were all fans of Star Trek, But everybody treated me terrifically. Everybody. It was a joy from start to finish. I did 12 episodes altogether. And everybody from J. Michael Straczynski, the writer-creator of Star Trek, Babylon 5, and all of the actors, they're all terrific. So I'm sorry, guys, I don't have anything bad to say.
Any other questions for Walter?
What was your inspiration for playing Bester? He was so evil, but I think he thought he was good.
People say to me, the young lady asked me, what was my inspiration for playing Bester? People say to me, how did it feel like playing a bad guy? Well, I have a responsibility as an actor. And I try not to editorialize the character. He's not a bad guy. How can I play him with truth and care about his convictions if I consider him a bad guy? So for me, I have to embrace what I can find in him that I can totally support. His allegiance to his crew, to the Corps, to the Psi Corps. That's something that I can totally support, totally get behind. And that's the way I try to deal with any character I play. I played a psychopathic murderer in a play called Night Must Fall, a guy who carries around a woman's head in a hat box. And I never let myself thinking of him in terms as a psychopathic killer. He had justification. He had reason. If I don't believe it, the audience isn't going to believe it. That's the way I feel. So that's the way I felt about playing Bester. It was, and the way J. Michael wrote it, there was a lot of room for expansion of who this guy was. He did things that people didn't like, but he was also he had a love in his life, a woman he loved very much. He was loyal to the people in his Corps. So it was just a delight all the way around. I never got tired of it.
Joe just did that animated movie. Has he talked to you about doing more Babylon 5 in the future?
No. Well, that's okay. No, I don't take any umbrage at that. My God, I was, the whole thing was kind of preposterous. What I've learned in these, by the way, I'll be 87. You can say happy birthday. I mean, 87. That's amazing. What was I saying before that? Anybody remember?
Preposterous.
Preposterous.
The whole thing about not coming back for any more Babylon 5.
But the whole thing was...
Because it was preposterous.
Oh, what was preposterous? Yes. What? Oh, I don't know if this is what I was leading up to. But one of the things that I find so amazing, life in general, and the older you get, guys, the more I think you embrace this concept or this notion, is how capricious it is. You think you got it all figured out, and you're going to follow a particular path, and your life is going to, have a certain direction, and you'll strive for certain goals, and some you'll achieve, and some you won't. But it's remarkable, the life changes that occur that change the course of everything that you thought was going to happen. I was supposed to do one episode of Babylon 5. I was in Chicago doing a convention, talking to a bunch of people like you, and I had a heart attack. And they rushed me to the hospital. I had a quadruple bypass. I was in the hospital 8 days. And I had to call Joe and say, I'm not going to be available to do this episode when you want me to do it. But thank you anyway. I really appreciate it. Well, first they tried to hold on to the episode, not to do it. But they ran out. He wrote every episode. So they ran out of episodes. And he had to call me and say, Walter, unfortunately, we had to shoot that episode. But I'll find something else for you. You know how many times you hear that in a lifetime? You don't have to be an actor to hear that. You know, that just happens. And people sometimes are quite sincere. They really mean it. But it never does. It never freaking happens. My whole baptism of fire, which is another story about the first 2 jobs that I had, maybe I'll tell them to you, I don't know. But anyway, he found another character for me to play. I didn't think he would. I thought it was over. You know, I had my shot. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. This is what you can expect during the course of your life. But instead of being a one-shot, you know, it became a recurring role, and a recurring role that was so much fun to play. It was so meaty. There was so much to do. It wasn't just an expository character. Expository character is what I had on Star Trek. A character who says, Captain, there's something out there. I don't know what it is. and then, of course, the next line is from our captain. Well, let me tell you what I think. And then you get all the emotion and all the dimension and everything. So we would just set up the scene, we set up the story, and then we're not really important to the outcome, or as is important. But in any case, going to work each day on Babylon and having a character who...
It's on a build-up to detonation.
It says 000 destruct 0. That's worrisome.
My hearing aids. So, there, it's even louder, isn't it? Okay, maybe it isn't louder. Maybe I'm just losing it. Anyway, so it was great. It was the best fun. I mean, I've done, like the Hitchcock that you saw the little clip from. That was great fun. That was playing opposite James Caan. And
James Caan, yeah.
He was the good guy, and I was the bad guy. And 2 of the actors who played my henchmen in that show went on to having their own series. Zalman King was The Young Lawyers,
right.
And Tony Musanti was Toma, a series called Toma. So they had very successful careers as long as they were with us. So yeah, that was great fun. I've done several other guest appearances before Star Trek that were challenging. So I don't know what the hell I was talking about.
Walter, could you imagine on the day when you look back that Joe D'Augusta brought you in to audition for this little space show that was getting middling ratings the first season on NBC, that it would change your life utterly and completely?
No. Who knew that? That's what I'm talking about. You don't know things like that. I mean, they happen, and sometimes they don't. There are people, I know actors who I've always thought were wonderful. And, you may have seen them, but you don't know their names. They never broke through. And and there's no damn good reason why they didn't. Other than perhaps they just never found the character that they could play that would give them that kind of impetus and give them that kind of propulsion to their careers. But I truly know many actors who, could be standing here, and you'd be very pleased to know their work. Yes, sir.
One last question.
Walter, I want to ask you, what may have given you more satisfaction, getting your own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, or being maybe in the movie with Bruce Campbell and Moontrap?
The question is,
That's a good question. No, hell no, that's a good question. I don't discount that at all. I haven't done that many other movies, other than the 7 Star Trek movies. I've just had, very low budget films that I've been involved in. Except that the Walk of Fame thing was about 20 years too late, Everybody else got theirs back in when we were either shooting the movies or right
The
after.
late 80s.
Pardon?
The late 80s.
Late 80s, yeah. And when they were getting them, it cost $3,000. You had to raise $3,000, or somebody had to. Well, Paramount came up with the money for Bill and Leonard and DeForest, and then they found a reason to come up with the money for Jimmy. Because they were doing it a DVD issue or VHS or something, and they by getting Jimmy's star, they helped generate funds from somewhere. In any case, they got it all handed to them pretty much. By the time it came to me, it was no longer $3,000. It was $30,000. Yeah, $30,000 in order to have a star. And then you, of course, had to be invited. They had to vote on it. And evidently, of the 3 people who voted, there was one guy who just wasn't ever going to vote for me. So he died. So once he passed on, they reconsidered. They had a change of mind. And you know where so we had raised from fans. This is, mine was probably the truest reflection.
Yours is 10 times more valuable.
Yeah. It's more a reflection of how fans felt, because the first 20 grand came from them.
Yeah.
We raised that. A couple of people on my behalf raised that money. The final 10 came from Rod Roddenberry. They went to him and said, "Would you be in?" And he said, "Absolutely." So he made it possible. And what a sweet thing that was. What a neat thing that was. Yeah, so it's nice. There are so many people on the Walk of Fame, and they're all stepped on every single day.
It's a metaphor.
well,
So I'm not sure how much of an ego boost that is at this point. No, I'm pleased that they finally included me. It's not something that I ever lost sleep over. But it was nice. It was nice.
well, it's very rare that you can come and spend an hour and a half with a true legend, and you just did. Walter Koenig, ladies and gentlemen. And